Dear sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق أجمعين سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. God states in the Holy Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, O people, we created you from a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes that you may recognize one another. In God's eyes, the most honored of you is the most God-conscious. God is all-knowing, all-aware. Amanna billah, sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. Let us enliven our hearts and our minds and our beautiful gathering with the remembrance of the Holy Prophet and his purified progeny. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala. Our world is plagued with problems. If we take a moment and we think about the condition of our world today, we'll see that in many cases we'll find many problems going on. For instance, we find that the world is riddled with poverty. According to some estimates, approximately 80% of the world population lives on less than $10 a day. And that about 50% of the world population, almost 4 billion people, they live on less than $2.50 a day. This is their state. This is how they live. We find that crime is widespread across the world. Here in the United States alone, every year, hundreds and thousands of violent crimes are committed. We find that war is rampant in the world. That as we speak, as we gather here, dozens of conflicts are going on in the world. And some of them are causing the greatest disasters. Yemen, for instance, is the greatest humanitarian disaster of the world today. And the list goes on. All of the other problems that plague the world that we live in today. But one of the worst, one of the most pressing problems that the world faces today, and which it could be argued is or underlies many of these other problems that we see in the world, is the existence of movements and ideologies of hatred and intolerance and division. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a well-known non-profit organization based here in the United States, the objective of this organization is to trace the various hate groups and hate incidents that occur in the United States. According to this organization, they tell us that in 2018, 2 years ago, they were able to identify over 1,000 hate groups that were active and in operation in the United States. Over 1,000, just here in the United States. Groups and movements and ideologies that are based on racism, that are based on xenophobia, that are based on religious extremism, that are based on sectarianism, that are based on supremacy and nationalism. many of these ideologies and these groups, they are prevalent in the societies and in the communities that we live in, and they serve as one of the most pressing problems. Their existence is one of the most pressing problems that the world faces today. So the question is, why do so many groups, why do so many ideologies and movements that are based on hatred, that are based on intolerance of others, that are based on division, why do all of these movements and these groups and these ideologies, why do they exist? Why are so many people in the world today so comfortable with expressing hatred and animosity towards those who don't look like them, who don't dress like them, who don't speak the same language, who don't have the same skin color, who don't come from the same country, who don't worship like them, who don't think like them, or who don't live like them? Why are so many people comfortable with expressing hatred toward the other, towards those that they assume to be different from them? Now, there could be many reasons, brothers and sisters. But one reason, I think, is because humanity has largely focused on the things that make us different and has forgotten or neglected the things that make us the same, the things that we share in common. We focused on our differences, the differences in our origin and place of birth, the differences of where we come from, the differences in the colors of our skin, the differences in the things that we believe in, the actions that we do, the things that we hold dearly, the things that make up our identity. All of these things, we have focused on these differences, and we have used these differences in order to claim superiority over others. But this is unsustainable, brothers and sisters. This is not the way that, as a human community, that we can live. Intolerance, hatred, division is something that is unsustainable. It will not allow us to flourish as a human community. It is true, brothers and sisters, that we have differences. And it is true that we cannot deny these differences. In fact, when we come to the Quran and we come to the teachings of the Holy Prophet and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, may God's peace and blessings be upon them all, we find that they talk about, they highlight some of these important differences. The Quran tells us, in the verse that I began with, God says, Ya ayyuhan nas, O humankind, O people, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, we created you from a male and a female. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا, and we made you into different nations, into different communities, into different tribes. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا. God says, I made you into different communities. This is a difference that I instilled in humanity, God tells us. I made you into different nations, different communities. In another verse, Allah says, He tells us, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ. And of the signs of God is that God created the heavens and the earth, and that God created you with various tongues and various colors. Meaning what? Meaning that we all speak different languages. How many languages are spoken in the world today? Countless number of languages, especially if we include various dialects. We'll find that even a single language has several different dialects. These differences in the way that we speak in our languages, these differences in the color of our skin and where we come from, These are differences that the Quran, it accepts. God says this is in fact a sign of the existence of God, of the majesty of God, that you are created and differently, and that you look differently and you speak differently. In another verse, God tells us, even the faith that you follow, even the religious path that you follow, God says, لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا. God says, for each of you, we made a law and we made a way. لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. Had God wanted, God would have made you into a single community with one revelation, a single revelation, one book, one prophet, one messenger, one message, one belief system, one way to practice this faith. God says, but God did not. Had God wanted, God would have made you into a single community, but God did not. So the Quran highlights that the human community is one that is colored with various differences. But it's important for us to remember that despite the Quran talking about these differences, highlighting these differences, we are still reminded that we have no excuse to use these differences as a means of superiority over others. As a means of assuming that I, because of the language that I speak, because of the country that I come from, because of the faith that I believe in, because of the school of thought, that I am better than others. Because when we come to these verses, in fact, we find that God gives us a particular wisdom. There is a particular wisdom behind these differences. God says, when the Quran says that God created us into different nations and tribes, شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِل, God says what? لِتَعَارَفُوا. So that you can recognize one another. There's a wisdom behind it. The wisdom is so that you can recognize, that you can know one another. When God says that one of the signs of God is that He created you with various languages, with various ways in which you express yourself, with various looks, God says, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. In these differences are signs for whom? For those who have knowledge. For those who take the time to reflect, to think, what is the wisdom behind all of our differences? What is the difference between these God-given differences? When God tells us that He has given us different paths to follow and to recognize God with, and that God decided not to make us a single community, He says, وَلَكِنْ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِي مَا آتَاكُمْ. So that God can test you. You are tested with these differences. To see what you do with these differences. Do you fail the test, God forbid? Or do you pass the test? Do you understand the wisdom behind these differences? And do you use these differences toward that which is good? The 13th of the month of Rajab is the anniversary of the birth of the commander of the faithful, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And it is during this time that we celebrate one of the greatest figures in the history of humanity. A man who, from the time that he was born until today, he continues to embody all that is great. He embodies all the virtues and the values that human society holds dear. And so as we come together to celebrate this great personality, to celebrate Imam Ali alayhi salam, I'm reminded of one of his most important and one of his most beautiful teachings. That which serves for us during this time and in the place and the era and the time that we live in, serves as a great lesson. And this is the lesson that I like to refer to as Imam Ali's vision for humanity. Imam Ali alayhi salam had a particular vision. He was a visionary. He had a particular vision for humanity. When we go back to history, of course, we all know that in the year 35 after Hijrah, when the Muslim community at large, it came and it pledged allegiance to Amir al-Mu'mineen as the leader of the political community. We know that Imam Ali alayhi salam shortly thereafter, in the year 38 after Hijrah, that he appointed a man by the name of Malik ibn al-Harith al-Nakha'i, popularly known as Malik al-Ashtar, one of his close companions and advisors. He appointed Malik al-Ashtar as the governor of Egypt. Egypt at the time had recently been conquered by the Muslims. And with Malik's appointment, Imam Ali alayhi salam sent with him a very important document, a letter teaching him and suggesting to him the ways in which he should govern his subjects, what his responsibilities are, what he is to do, and how he is to go about acting as governor of this new land. And this letter, we all know, is included in the famous collections of the sayings and the sermons and lectures of Imam Ali, Nahjul Balagha, compiled by the great scholar Al-Sharif al-Radi. And in this sermon, it is sermon number 53, it's a long sermon. We find these special instructions that Amir al-Mu'mineen gives to Malik al-Ashtar. And this letter, in fact, some of you will know that this letter was referenced back in 1997 at the 50th anniversary of the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. It was referenced by then former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan when he gave the address. This was back in 1997. He gave the address, he spoke towards the Muslims, and he told them, there is a great example in your history of Imam Ali and the way that Imam Ali perceived human rights, the way that Imam Ali understood human rights. And this letter, as I mentioned, it's a long letter, but I'd like to bring to your attention, remind you of a short passage in this letter where the Imam, he tells Malik, he tells him, وَأَشْعِرْ قَلْبَكَ الرَّحْمَةَ لِلرَّعِيَّةِ وَالْمَحَبَّةَ لَهُمْ وَاللُّطْفَ بِهِمْ وَلَا تَكُونَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ سَبْعًا ضَارِيًا تَغْتَنِمُ أَكْلَهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ صِنْفَانِ إِمَّا أَخٌ لَكَ فِي الدِّينِ وَإِمَّا نَظِيرٌ لَكَ فِي الْخَلْقِ. He tells him, O Malik, habituate your heart to express mercy towards your subjects. Make your heart be a heart that expresses constantly, it expresses mercy towards those who you rule, your subjects, and to affection and kindness to them. And do not stand over them like a greedy beast who desires to devour them. And then he tells him, for they are of two kinds. They are either your brethren in religion or your counterparts in creation. In this short phrase, we find a remarkable statement by Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali alayhi salam. Because we know that the Islamic teachings, they hold religious fellowship in high regard. That as people who share the same faith, that we have certain rights and responsibilities upon one another. The Quran describes those who share the faith of Islam, those who have common iman, as what? As brothers and as sisters. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, the Quran tells us. And that we have certain responsibilities towards our brothers and sisters in faith. We know that there are certain rights that our brothers and sisters in faith, they have before us. And we have certain responsibilities towards one another. But despite this, we find that here Imam Ali alayhi salam reminds us of an equally important relationship that far too often we tend to neglect or forget. And that is our shared humanity. The Imam says that there are some who they share the faith with you. They are your brothers and sisters in iman. They are your brothers and sisters in religion and in faith. But the Imam also reminds us that there are others who may not share your faith. They don't share your belief. They don't believe in the things that you believe in, or they don't believe in them in the same way that you believe in them. Yet, they are still important. You still have an important responsibility towards them. You still have an important relationship with them. And that is that they are your counterparts in creation. They are your brothers and sisters in humanity. And this is a very important point. And not only does Imam Ali remind Malik al-Ashtar of this, that there are people who don't share the faith with you, but they share in humanity, but that you have a responsibility to express kindness and care and compassion and mercy towards them. In other words, Imam Ali was not just telling him, Malik, listen, you are going to this new place and there's going to be a lot of people who don't share your faith. He wasn't giving him sort of a sociological description of the society that he's going to go to. He was in fact reminding him that despite that you will be with and you will interact with many non-Muslims, people who don't share your faith, you still have a responsibility to be kind to them, to express compassion to them, to express care for them. You know, when we go back to history and we examine this statement a little bit more, to try to put it into historical context. Egypt at the time, if you go back to the early part of the first Islamic century or the 7th century of the Common Era, the time when Egypt had been conquered, and the time where Imam Ali, here, he was writing this letter and he was handing it to Malik al-Ashtar in the year 38 after Hijrah, that early period. If you go and you look at Egyptian society, you'll find that the population of Muslims in Egypt at the time was very small. There's a historian of Islam and Muslim societies by the name of Professor Richard Bullitt. He's written a book, it's called Conversion to Islam in the Medieval Period. And basically this study, he traces the amount or the rate of the conversion of people who were non-Muslim to Islam in the early period of Islam over the course of several centuries. And the book is actually available and you can find it online. In this extensive study that he has, he shows us that at this early period of Islamic history, meaning in the first half of the first century of Islam, as Imam Ali had appointed Malik al-Ashtar as governor of Egypt, the Muslim population of Egypt at the time could not have been more than 2 or 3%. He provides quantitative data and analysis. He says at most it could have been between 2 to 3%. And in fact, he does not just study Egypt, he studies the areas surrounding Arabia. present-day Iran, Iraq, other areas, Syria, and all of these other areas. And he shows the projection of the rate of conversion of non-Muslims to Islam. And in this study, he notes that it was not until 250 years later, in the middle of the 3rd Islamic century, that the Muslim population in Egypt got to 50%. 50. After 250 years of rule, the Muslim population in Egypt became 50% of the population. And again, like I said, he looks at the rate of conversion across several regions, and they all exhibit similar trends. This tells us two things. Number one, it exposes this misconception that Islam spread by force and by violence and by coercion. It shows that this was absolutely a lie. Because if this was the case, if Islam as a religion truly spread through force and through violence, and it was imposed upon the people, then it would not take 250 years for the communities, the Muslim community, to reach 50% of the population. This is number one. But number two, and more importantly for the purposes of our discussion, it shows us that here Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he promoted, during this early time, he promoted a sense of peaceful coexistence with people who were largely non-Muslim. Here, Malik is going to an area where he will govern, at least in the beginning, he will govern a society that is 97 or 98% non-Muslim. Yet Imam Ali alayhi salam, he reminds him, he tells him, listen, you might have grown up in an area, you might be familiar of the area that you're familiar with, the society that you're familiar with is one in which most people, they share your faith. They share your religious practices and your beliefs. But now you are going somewhere where the vast majority of people do not share your beliefs. They do not share your faith. And you have a responsibility not only towards those who share your belief, but also an equal responsibility to those who do not share your belief. وَأَشْعِرْ قَلْبَكَ الرَّحْمَةَ لِلرَّعِيَّةِ. He tells him, make your heart. This is a very beautiful statement, huh? Because for some people, some interactions, it kind of comes naturally for us, right? Usually, with our parents, for instance, with some family members, we don't have to make too much effort to express love and kindness towards them. It comes naturally, right? Sometimes with siblings, sometimes, not always. Sometimes with siblings, you know, it comes naturally, the love and kindness. You don't necessarily have to consciously work on it, right? But here, Amir al-Mu'mineen is telling him, وَأَشْعِرْ قَلْبَكَ الرَّحْمَةِ. Be conscious of this duty. Make sure that you put in the effort to make your heart turn, be filled with compassion and mercy and love and kindness towards everyone around you, those who you are responsible for. Very beautiful statement. وَأَشْعَرْ قَلْبَكَ الرَّحْمَةَ لِلرَّعِيَّةِ وَالْمَحَبَّةَ لَهُمْ. Love, affection towards them. وَاللُّطْفَ بِهِمْ. Kindness towards them. Do not take advantage of them. Do not be unjust to them. Do not hurt them. Do not assume that you are superior or better than them. This is the message that Imam Ali alayhi salam is giving to Malik. And he is giving to us and to all of the generations that come and listen. He is reminding us of the importance of our shared humanity, brothers and sisters. Something too often, more often than not, we tend to forget. We tend to neglect. More often than not, we remember our differences. The first thing we see is those things that make us different. And more often than not, we forget those things that make us the same. This idea of a shared humanity is one that finds a lot of evidence in the teachings of the Quran and in those of the Holy Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. When we look at the Quran, this beautiful Quran, we find that it begins and it ends with a similar message. The first chapter in its arrangement, the first chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Fatiha, we begin with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to God, Lord of the entire universe. Not the Lord of the Arabs or the Persians or the Americans or so and so. Not the Lord of the Muslims or the Jews or the Christians or whatever other group. The Quran says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. The Lord of all the universe, the Lord of all of creation. Reminding us that there is something that we all share in common. It is a common origin. And then we go through the entire Quran all the way to the last chapter, chapter 114, Surah An-Nas. We say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of whom? The Lord of the people, all people. Not the Lord of the Muslims, not the Lord of the Sunnis or the Lord of the Shi'is. The Lord of people. Reminding us what? Reminding us again of this shared humanity. That we are counterparts in humanity. We are brothers and sisters in humanity. And as such, we are reminded of the importance of placing this similarity at the forefront of our affairs, brothers and sisters. That we remember and we not only remember, we highlight and we take advantage of our shared commonalities. What can we do? Very briefly. 3 things. Number 1 is that we have to be able to seek guidance always from God. Oftentimes, we find that we may be in a situation whereby because of the place that I come from, or the language that I speak, or my skin color, or my nationality, or my socioeconomic status, or whatever it may be, my school of thought, that sometimes I feel a sense of superiority over others. I feel that I am better than others. We seek guidance from God to remind us of the importance of being humble, of humility, of not only remembering our strengths and what make us great, but also remembering our weaknesses. Subhanallah, look at what the world is going through today. The tests that the world goes through today. Does a small, very minute virus, does it distinguish between an Arab and a Persian, a Muslim and a non-Muslim, someone who is rich, someone who is poor? No. It does not distinguish, it does not look at the color of my skin and say, this person I should infect and this person I should not. No. And look what it does to us. It reminds us of our common feature of humanity, that we are very weak. We are very weak. So it's important for us to remind ourselves to be humble, to express humility, not to allow whatever status it may be that we have, or we assume that we have, not to allow that to express or claim superiority over others. This is number 1. Number 2, brothers and sisters, is that it's important for us to learn about one another. Many times we enjoy living in our own bubbles, in our own comfort zones, interacting with the people who we assume to be most resembling to us. And oftentimes we don't take the time and effort to get to know those who we are not as familiar with. And this, brothers and sisters, is the source of all of the problems. the superiority that we express over one another, the ignorance, the stereotypes, the misconceptions, they're all based on what? They're all based on ignorance of the other. This is why if you look at many of the polls that talk about the rise of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim sentiment in the United States, what's interesting is most people who express animosity towards Muslims, when they're asked whether they know a Muslim or not, they say no. We hate them, we despise them, but we don't know any of them personally. Allahu Akbar. The source of much of the hatred and intolerance that we have of one another is because we are ignorant of one another. But when I say that we should learn about one another, we should learn about one another from one another, brothers and sisters. Because sometimes what ends up happening is that we try to learn about one another, those who are different than us, but the sources that we go to and the means by which we do so, they perpetuate even further misconceptions instead of resolving them. And so this is a problem. We have to be able to learn from one another, about one another. Reach out to those who do not share your faith. Reach out to those who do not share the things that you believe in or the practices that you engage in. Learn about them. Learn about them. When we learn about those who do not share our faith, our tradition, our understanding, this makes us not only more tolerant of others, but it even increases us in our own faith and determination of what we believe in. Whereas if we don't, we remain in a sense of ignorance. I read a humorous story about two young fish. One day, they were swimming at the surface of a river, up close to the surface. And as they were swimming, they had their morning swim every morning together. As they're swimming together, they passed by an elderly fish who was swimming beneath them, a little bit deeper. As the fish beneath them was swimming, it looked up, it passed by, and it told them, "Hey guys, how's the water up there?" So one of the small fish turned to his friend and he told him, "What on earth is water? What on earth is water?" When we're surrounded in only one understanding, in only one context, in only one environment, then not only do we not recognize others, but we also don't recognize ourselves. We don't recognize what makes us special in terms of what we believe in. We don't recognize why our values are so important. And so it's important for us to learn about one another from one another. This is number 2. And number 3, and finally, that we work towards participating in common projects of goodness. When God talks about our differences, God says, لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا. We made a path and a law and a tradition for each of you. And had God wanted, He would have made you into a single community, but He did not. وَلَكِنْ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِي مَا آتَاكُمْ. Then God says what? فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. Compete with one another, vie with one another, not in who can make the most money, not in who can take the other down, but compete with one another in good acts. Cooperate. Put your hands together for the common good. Work towards those things that will bring goodness to all of society. It raises everyone up. It lifts everyone up. And there are many opportunities, brothers and sisters. But it's important for us to take the step. It's important for us to work towards doing so. And through this way, we can claim that we are the followers of one of the greatest men in the history of creation. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. We claim that we are his followers not only through word, but more importantly through deed. I'd like to finish my talk tonight with a poem that I wrote in honor of Amir al-Mu'mineen a few years ago. It's a short poem in English. I pray that inshallah we will benefit from it. The title of the poem is, Why Do You Love Ali? Why do you love Ali? More than once I've been asked. Now tell me who he is. More than once I've been tasked. To answer this query is not simple, you see. If the trees were all pens, tells us God's appointee, and the jinn were accountants, and the oceans ink, and they all work together perfectly in sync, they still would fail to calculate Haidar's great traits. They still would fail to calculate Haidar's great traits, for this is Ali, simply the greatest of greats. Let's begin by asking what the Kaaba will say. Let's begin by asking what the Kaaba will say when asked about his birthmark on its wall today. Ask Muhammad's bed, who occupied you that night? Ask Muhammad's bed, who occupied you that night? It will call out for Ali, the bravest in sight. Then let's ask Jibreel, when he brought down the sword, while la fata illa Ali, the heavens roared. Or let's ask Khaybar's gate, who ripped you out of place? It will point out to none other than Haidar's face. Let's ask Mount Uhud, who ran away and who stayed? Let's ask Mount Uhud, who ran away and who stayed? It will yell, Al-Karrar came to the Prophet's aid. Then ask the city of knowledge, who holds its key? Tirmidhi will point to Ali, I guarantee. Or ask the needy beggar with the ring endowed. He'll say, I took it in prayer as Ali bowed. Then ask the poor orphan to be a declarant. He'll cry, Ali was my source of love and parent. Ask the ant that Ali swore he'd never oppress, even if he was given the world to possess. Let's ask Dua al-Sabah and Dua Kumail. Let's ask Dua al-Sabah and Dua Kumail about their beauty and Ali's name. They will unveil, ask the second Shaykh, what does Lawla Ali mean? Ask the second Shaykh, what does Lawla Ali mean? He'd admit his need for Ali to intervene. But sufficient for us is the Prophet's dictate, where Ali and the truth, the messenger, equates. But sufficient for us is the Prophet's dictates, where Ali and the truth, the messenger, equates. Thus, please, don't ask me why I love him so greatly. Such a noble man captures my heart innately. My Master Ali. My Master Ali, your name makes my heart flutter. My Master Ali, your name makes my heart flutter, an overwhelming peace when your name I utter. in all your greatness, you were still the most humble. In all your greatness, you were still the most humble, with orphans so soft, but in battle you'd rumble. Eloquence is ashamed when it competes with you. Eloquence is ashamed when it competes with you. In all of your dealings, justice you would pursue. We call you Lion of God, a sage, kind and brave. But when asked who you were, you said Muhammad, slave. We call you Lion of God, a sage, kind and brave. But when asked who you were, you said Muhammad's slave. O dust upon which Ali walked, I envy you. O dust upon which Ali walked, I envy you. O air which Haydar inhaled, I envy you too. Salman, Miqdad, Abu Dhar, how lucky you were. Salman, Miqdad, Abu Dhar, how lucky you were every day to serve Ali and with him confer. On this night in Rajab, on this night in Rajab, I have one wish only. Please, Ali, in my grave, do not leave me lonely. On this night in Rajab, I have one wish only. Please, Ali, in my grave, do not leave me lonely. With Allah's will, I plead for your intercession. To you, I dedicate my life and profession. With Allah's will, I plead for your intercession. To you, I dedicate my life and profession. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. I congratulate you, my dear brothers and sisters, once again on this auspicious occasion, the birth of the Prince of Believers, the Commander of the Faithful, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all the visitation and the ziyarah of Amir al-Mu'mineen in this life, and to grant us his shafa'ah and intercession in the hereafter. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.